most importantly, taking advantage of these days to take good care of ourselves, and especially taking care of ourselves spiritually. So that is connected not just to our physical and mental health, but this is an excellent opportunity for us to remember priorities in life. And specifically, remember that no matter how crazy the world gets, that it's always an opportunity for us to deepen our spiritual awareness. So that's how I will start off today's class. There are files that are posted for you. And also there were some questions that came in. Some people have asked me about consultations. And specifically, they have asked if they can get consultations now that the course has already started, and the answer is yes. And so for that, the way we can do it is just send me a message through my consulting website. My consultation website is easy to remember. It's Crow Consultations, just like it sounds, crowconsultations.com. And you can send an email through there and just tell me that you're interested in a consultation, and we will take care of that directly outside of Floracopia. So you don't have to contact Floracopia to, purchase this add-on that some people got. A lot of people got it, actually. And thank you to all of you who got that consultation. And you are keeping me very busy. And it's a great pleasure and honor to meet all of you in person and take some time to talk about your health concerns and what herbal medicine might be able to help with. And there's several files, not a lot, but a few. And these are some things from last week. We have the question and answer file from last week. And thank you for putting your questions there. And you will see that there's a wide range of questions about a wide range of topics. And I have responded to those, and I will do that every week. But I just want to mention that Sherry and I made a discovery right before class. It always happens right before. And we found out that the submission form for the questions is not working well. And questions are coming in such a way that they're all scrambled in terms of time frame. And so we have no idea what came in 3 weeks ago and what came in 5 minutes ago. So if you submitted a question last week and it's not answered, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, and it hasn't been answered, well, that's why, because it's in a confusing system, and we're going to get that all straightened out. Now for tonight, if you have questions that you can put in the chat directly, those will get forwarded over to my document right away, and I will also see them while we are talking in class. In tonight's topic, well, there's many topics actually, but in tonight's group, there are many opportunities for discussion about some of the more complicated issues related to using herbs and medications together and talking to your doctor about medications. So that's the main topic, although we do have some things to finish up from last week. And also another file. There's a file on withdrawal from various addictions and opioids. A question came in about withdrawal from opioids. And we're going to use that as an opportunity to talk about withdrawals from medications in general. And that's one of the big topics for today. And then there are lots of other things. So plenty of things to talk about. Let's just go ahead and jump in. And I want to finish the main points that were left over from last week. Uh, but actually, I'm going to hold off on that just a moment because there are a couple of questions that I do want to address here that came in from last week. Now, a very common type of question that comes in is, what do I do about this health condition? Now, in an herb class, we would be addressing those questions specifically and individually, okay? But this is not a class about how to treat things, okay? This is a class about how you can learn how to treat yourself and the resources that are available for you to do that. So I wanted to use one question about one healthcare issue that came in as an example of what we need to start doing instead of posing the question now in the last couple of weeks of this course. Instead of posing the question, what do I do for this health condition? What I would like to hear is, I would like to hear your case study of what you did to answer that question yourself, okay? And you have all kinds of resources now, the internet links that I gave you. And I'll just go through one of the questions. I'll walk you through this and I'll show you one of the ways that we can answer some of the questions, all right? And so next week, instead of asking, what do I do for this health condition? What I would like to hear is, I would like you to post a story, post a testimonial, and I would like you to say, I had a question about my healthcare for this particular condition, and I went and I did the research, and this is what I found at these particular links, and these are the suggested herbs and so forth. So there was a question that came in, and it had to do with the condition called vitiligo, okay? And vitiligo is a disorder of the skin pigmentation, and it's somewhat, it's not extremely common, but it's well known. And it is something that when I was asked this particular question, I don't have a lot of experience with it, okay? And so this is an opportunity for me to do this research also. And I couldn't give a specific answer to the question about, okay, use these herbs, all right? And in general, that's the case with a lot of these types of questions that I get, because people aren't getting answers because it's not commonly known, it's not commonly treated. And in some cases, it's very rare. The condition that they have is very rare, or it's extremely complex. And so this is also an exercise in setting realistic expectations. Okay, so when we do this research, we're looking for a lot of different kinds of information. We're looking, first of all, to educate ourselves about the condition. And then we're looking also at what herbs might be applicable. But then we also want to see the bigger context and say, well, is this actually something that we can realistically treat? What are the results? You know, what can be done? So let me go ahead and show you here a couple of links, just a series of things, so that you can see how I would go about answering the question for myself. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen share. All right, there we go. And so we are back at PubMed. And I'm just moving this around a little bit so I can grab this other file from behind. Hold on just a second here. Okay. All right. So this is a little research project. What can we find out? And what can we find out specifically about herbal treatment for this condition? Now, I'll go ahead and I'll skip to the very end and I'll say that, okay, I do have an answer for you, and I'm going to give you an herbal treatment for it. Okay. But in the meantime, let's just walk through this as if you were doing your homework and you were telling me what you're going to do. So let's just put in vitiligo here. And this is the search panel for all databases. Okay. And so here we go. And here's all of this stuff here that comes up. Now, what I'm going to suggest is, in a situation like this, you want to go to PubMed Central, okay? And so here, what comes up if you do a scan in PubMed Central for vitiligo? Well, what do you see? 9,478 listings for vitiligo. All right, so that's a huge amount of information. Now, what you will need to do with this level of information from the databases is that you have to narrow it down, okay? And basically, now you need to start narrowing it down using other keywords. So why don't we try vitiligo herb, okay? And see what comes up. Well, that narrowed it down quite a bit, down to 220. And so here's something that pops up right away, which is, here is an herbal formula, Kung Bai Ling, for the treatment of vitiligo. And what is Kung Bai Ling? It's a Chinese patent medicine. That means it's made from herbs based on an old traditional formula. This has been demonstrated as an effective therapy for vitiligo in China. All right, so I just found an answer, okay, to your question. What herbs are helpful for vitiligo? Well, this one study is saying, all right, here's this Chinese patent formula, and very likely you can find this Chinese patent formula. But now let's jump over to another database, and this is one that I gave you that is specifically for Chinese herbal formulas, okay? So what we're doing here is I'm showing you how we educate ourselves at a clinical level for self-care, okay? So let's let's go here and let's pop out of this and let's pop into the other database. Okay, here we go. This is the Chinese medicine database. I'm going to suggest that we do, that we just put in vitiligo in the search, okay? So here we are, vitiligo, and here it is. Okay, treatment of vitiligo with Chinese herbs. And there's all kinds of things that start to pop up. Okay, treatment of vitiligo with Chinese herbs. And this is like a gold mine of information. Okay, so most likely, if you have vitiligo, you have never come across this website and you haven't studied the Chinese herbal treatment of vitiligo, although you might have. But this particular website by this gentleman that I introduced you to last week, Subhuti Dharmananda, okay, who is both a practitioner of Chinese medicine and very well versed in allopathic medicine. As you can see here, it's a combination of very good allopathic chemistry, biochemistry, Western medicine, and then here's this whole list of all of these different things that are used in Chinese medicine, okay? So, and then all of these different diagnoses that are given by these different doctors in these different places and so on. So this is a very rich source of herbs for vitiligo, because if you go through here, compound tablet of tribulus, all right? Well, tribulus is an easily available herb. Even at Whole Foods, you're going to find tribulus, okay? And then you're going to see things like spirodella, which is a rare Chinese herb, hoshawwood, commonly available. Okay, it's something that you can get at Whole Foods, and you can get it at dragon herbs also, xanthium, dong quai. Lots of people have heard of dong quai. Some people may not be too thrilled to consider taking ground up scorpions. That's a classic sort of Chinese approach. But then there's things like safflower and lots of other things. So we can modify these. You know, we don't have to use the traditional formulas with animal products in them, although, you know, they're there for a reason. And so now I'm going to show you one more thing here before we wrap this up, and I give you the solution that I'm suggesting. And that is, let's pop over to another database, which is the Herbalgram database, okay? And let's go to advanced search, okay, here. Let's see what comes up with the advanced search. And here, here's the advanced global search. And so why don't we just select all? These are all the different publications that are going to have some information. And so now let's, okay, so here's our text, okay, vitiligo. That's what we're looking for. Here it is. All right, and here are all of these articles about herbs and vitiligo, all right? So this is far more than I know personally, okay? But now that I've done this search, since I did this earlier this week, I understand a lot more about the condition, and I understand now that there's all kinds of potential herbs. Like this first study, it shows that ginkgo may have promise as treatment for vitiligo. Okay, but when we read these studies, we have to really understand: is it meaningful information or not? Because sometimes it sounds positive, and sometimes it just means it may have promise. You see, so that's what I would encourage everybody to do. And I just went through a few of the links. It's a little bit hit and miss when it comes to those various sources that I gave you, but those are the ones that I just thought, okay, these have pretty good possibility of having some information. And so that's what I did, and I found some things that are helpful. So that's what you can do. And now what I want to show you is my answer, okay? Because in this particular question that was posted, let me read the question specifically so that people know what it is that I am giving. And the question is, what topical treatment do you recommend for vitiligo? I have been prescribed steroid creams as part of a complex treatment, also utilizing UVB, nutritional support, stress management. I do not wish to use the steroids, okay? Well, that gave me a particular clue of something that I have recommended to people many times. It's really simple. It's not very expensive. It's quite pleasant. And it is an alternative to steroid cream, basically. So the use of the steroid cream in the treatment of vitiligo makes some sense, but there's all kinds of other mechanisms that are being explored, and you'll learn about those when you study the herbal treatments and the research into it. So this particular oil is, let me pull it up and show you. Okay, so I put this in the file, and it's a very simple thing. It is simply a herbal oil made from licorice and sarsaparilla. Okay, and licorice and sarsaparilla are both very, they're sources of phytosteroids, and therefore this represents a kind of herbal alternative to steroid cream. Now, there's all kinds of steroid creams for all kinds of purposes, and this is kind of a generic folk medicine kind of approach, because these two plants are rich in phytosteroids. And at the same time, what matters is that people tell me that this works, and it works for on a variety of things, including things where the steroid cream has stopped working. This works. Or specifically, what reminded me of this was several people have said, I want to stop the steroid cream. And I said, okay, try this instead. And it has been very helpful. Now, I don't make any claims about it. It's really simple, but basically you just take the licorice and the sarsaparilla root in 1 pound each, and you cover it with your favorite type of oil. It doesn't really matter because they have different therapeutic benefits, olive, sesame, or coconut. And you warm it slowly, and you can do that in a crock pot. You should just keep it mildly, lightly warm for about 3 days. And you can just heat it a little bit on the stovetop and then just let it sit. You can put it in a double boiler, do it in a crock pot. Just don't boil it, just warm it. The herbs are going to absorb some oil, and so therefore make sure and put some extra on top. This is not rocket science. It's home cooking, okay? And you'll probably want to make several batches over time if you need it. So just experiment a little bit. I will mention also, and this is a specific answer to your question, that neem oil in Ayurveda is used for vitiligo. And so you may want to add a little bit of neem oil to the finished product before you apply it. It doesn't mean that you need to cook it in neem oil, because neem oil has a very unpleasant sort of sulfur smell. So what I would suggest is that you prepare the oil this way, and then what you can do is that you can take this oil and you can mix it with neem. You could even do half and half, of the licorice sarsaparilla oil, a teaspoon, and then a teaspoon of the neem oil, like that. That's perfectly fine. Then with all of these things, we do a little patch test. Just try it by itself first and see how it feels. And then there are some essential oils that might be helpful also for anti-inflammatory purpose. So this is basically what we're addressing here. This is not specific treatment of vitiligo. What this is what do you do as an alternative to a steroid cream, okay? And some of the essential oils that might be helpful, helichrysum, rose, geranium, and chamomile, can also be added to this. And the amount is 5 drops total of essential oil. That's either 5 drops of one or 5 drops of 2 combined, or 5 drops of total per teaspoon of the oil. Now, we come to the basic question here, and I'm going to be coming back to this question several times, both in this class and the next 2 classes as well. It's a fundamental question we have to ask. When we have conditions that are difficult to treat, and I don't actually know how difficult vitiligo is, and I think it probably depends on the individual and how extensive it is and so forth. We always need to have realistic expectations. And what I would say is that this simple approach using this oil, I would not expect anything dramatic. What I would expect is that this can offer some degree of a botanical counterpart to a steroid cream. Now, there are some conditions where it has been reported back to me that this worked equally well or better than the steroid cream, but that's not vitiligo. Okay, there's other things that this has been treating. So that's something to keep in mind. But now the question comes, what do we do when we're faced with conditions that we don't know the outcome? The condition might not be so common, that practitioners don't see it so often. There's no real established protocols. There's a lot of conditions like this that people come to herbalists for. And what about conditions that herbalists even know that are just more stubborn? What do we do about stubborn cases? And the basic principle that I want to present here is, no matter what condition we have, there are many strategies to improve our health, you see? And so therefore, let's just continue with this example of this disorder of pigmentation in the skin. Well, that's a very specific disorder, okay? And from my limited understanding, I do believe that there's a genetic component and an autoimmune component, but I don't know that much about it. But here's the thing. The likelihood of actually being able to treat it successfully is based not just on the external treatment, okay? It's based on the overall health of the individual. And that's a principle that we can apply to everything. And so one of the things that's important to remember is that we may not be able to actually successfully treat a particular condition, but we can improve our overall health, okay? And I see this over and over again. And even just this week, I've had several conversations with people about this, that their condition is stubborn. They've had it for a long time. They've been to a lot of practitioners. It's not working. Western medicine doesn't have a lot to offer them. And I just come in and I say, well, look, I don't want to be just another person in this whole line of failures. So let's make sure that we address this in a way that we can see some progress overall, at least. So many times what I will do is I will just say, let's work on your overall health and well-being first for a while and see if we can make some progress. So what that means is that if you are a person who has symptoms of vitiligo and you're not very healthy and you're not very health conscious and you're not doing a lot with your healthcare and self-care routines, then I would say that whatever we do superficially is somewhat of an uphill battle. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean you can't improve your health. And the more you can improve your health, the more it supports the treatment of the specific condition. Okay, so that's just a quick little exercise that I wanted to do from last week. And let's go ahead and let me see where we are now. Now we're going to go back and we're going to talk about some of the, let me just make sure I covered all the things I wanted to with that. All right, now I want to go back and finish up the discussion about some of the issues that are very commonly found in modern herbal clinical practices, naturopathic practices, and functional medicine clinics and so forth. And I gave you a list of what I call what we can actually label as trendy conditions and wastebasket diagnoses. So again, just to introduce this, just because something is very trendy or because it's kind of a wastebasket diagnosis, meaning that everybody gets it because we don't know what else to say. It doesn't mean that it's incorrect, all right? But the challenge is putting it into the correct context so that we get the proper treatment plan. That was the entire point of what I was trying to say last time. So I gave a list: SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and heavy metals, and leaky gut, and parasites, and candida, and the methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, and the need to detoxify. And these are just a few of the main things that people are told over and over and over again. And I agree, but is that really what's going on? And so what I wanted to point out about this is that if we are practicing natural medicine and we're thinking holistically, then we should think holistically. And a lot of these things that are very common, and the reason that I picked these out is because in consultations, I would say that a majority of people, when they send me their medical files, there's something about bacterial overgrowth and there is something about heavy metals that are there. And then there's something about parasites, suspected or found or not, usually not actually. And something about a detox. So these are things that herbalists and naturopaths and functional medical doctors are diagnosing widely, commonly, and treating widely and commonly. And I don't have any problem with it if it's the right thing at the right time in the right way for the right person for the right length of time. But I want to point out that all of these things are just different versions of the germ theory. Okay, they are not holistic thinking. They're different versions of get rid of the germs. Okay, well, with heavy metals, it's a germ theory also, even though it's not germs, it's actually get rid of the metal. Okay, so all of this stuff is pretty much based on get rid of something. Okay, and that's the problem, because if it's based on getting rid of something, then it can stress the body. And so here I will introduce a fundamental paradigm that we will consider more in this and the last two modules. And that is allopathic medicine is strongly based on the germ theory. Get rid of something, kill it, flush it out, chelate it out, all right? And if that is what we're doing here in natural medicine also, then we are not actually practicing holistic medicine. We're practicing allopathic germ theory medicine using natural products. And that's the difficulty with this. Now, the reason that this is important to consider is because holistic medicine, classical Asian medicine, and holistic medicine in general, thinks outside of this simple idea of get rid of something. It thinks much more in terms of rebuild, okay? And so in Ayurveda, the whole branch of medicine called Rasayana, rejuvenation therapy, all right? There's heavy emphasis on nourishment, rebuilding, rehydrating, rebalancing. And therefore, we have to ask a question: how much of these things that we want to get rid of are there opportunistically? How much are they true factors? And how much do we actually have to attack them? And how much instead should we be thinking about rebuilding the body so that it can do that by itself? So with SIBO, for example, SIBO is frequently diagnosed as a causative factor of digestive problems in the upper GI. And that is true. But here's where it gets complicated. And that is that people with SIBO many times got the SIBO from taking antibiotics, all right? And so then the question is, what's the treatment going to be? And the treatment, as I mentioned last week, is frequently attack the germs. It's more germ theory. And the only difference is that the practitioners are prescribing berberine instead of antibiotics, you see. So berberine is a herbal antibiotic. It's an herbal antimicrobial, and it's hard on the digestive system. And so here, this is where my thinking diverges. And my thinking looks at the digestive system, and I say, why are the bacteria there opportunistically? What are the opportunistic weaknesses that are allowing the bacteria to be there? Okay, and so in a certain way, my thinking is diverging from that of Louis Pasteur, okay, who is saying, germs cause disease. And there's truth to that, but at this particular point, if the person's got SIBO because of a history of antibiotics, I would say, well, why continue with that kind of treatment just using natural products? Why not consider the opportunistic presence of the microbes? And there are three things that I always come back to in the digestive tract that are applicable in other systems as well. But the main things in the digestive tract: number one, motility, the biorhythmic movement. If you can regulate the biorhythmic movement, that supports gut immunity. Second, inflammation. If you can balance the inflammation, then that supports gut immunity also, okay? And then third is going to be mucous membrane integrity, and that does address leaky gut, all right? So if those three things are taken care of, mucous membrane integrity, motility, and inflammation, then you don't have to think in terms of the germ theory. You're thinking in terms of broader systemic functions. Okay. Now it just so happens that a lot of the herbs that help with motility and that help restore gut integrity, mucous membrane integrity, and reduce inflammation, they also have various degrees, various levels of antimicrobial power as well. But it's a difference in thinking, and it's also a difference strategically, because if you see bacterial overgrowth on the test, like I showed you last week, and you say, oh, take berberine, many times it just makes people's stomach hurt worse, okay? And therefore, we try to regulate the terrain. Now, the only reason that I'm covering this in this course is because this is so common. People are being given this kind of diagnosis very, very commonly. All right. Now, I'm going to continue with a few more comments along the same lines, and that is that I'm going to talk about the parasites here a little bit, because parasites are really, really trendy, okay? And lots of clinicians are looking at parasites, they're looking for parasites, and they are blaming parasites. Now, in a certain way, this is also allopathic thinking, because we're looking for germs as a causative agent. And when it comes to real parasitology, that is correct, okay? But when it comes to popular culture parasitology, it frequently is not correct. And that's where I make a distinction. And this, I'm just mentioning these principles here to help you in case you're receiving this information now, or you receive it in the future and somebody says, well, you have parasites, all right? And they show you bacterial overgrowth as proof of that. That's not parasites. Bacterial overgrowth is bacterial overgrowth. Now, the weakened gut function does give us a propensity towards parasitic infections. But parasitic infections are not the same thing as bacterial overgrowth. They're different. And that's something that everybody should keep in mind for your clinical level self-care. Parasitology is a real branch of medicine. There are real parasites. They cause real suffering. They cause real diseases, okay? But they are also a very trendy wastebasket diagnosis. And so here's my statement. And I said it last week, I'll just say it again. There's no such thing as a parasite cleanse, all right? There is diagnosis of the organism, treatment of the organism. If it's just a cleanse, it may give you temporary relief, but it doesn't mean that it's going to get rid of the organism. Now, I did give you a link to the Parasitology Center. And there are several places where you can do parasite tests. You can do them from home. Just scoop up a little bit of the poop and put it in the bottle with the preservative and put it in the mail. And the mail person doesn't even know what they've got. And they send it back to Phoenix, Arizona, and they'll send you the results. All right. There's another, well, let me just finish that thought. If you actually get a diagnosis of a parasite, on the one hand, it's good news because you found a causative agent, okay? And if you have been traveling and you find that you do have a parasitic organism, then if you have symptoms that started while you were traveling, you got sick, you got the febrile diarrheal disease condition, sickness, and you haven't been feeling well ever since, and you found an organism that you likely picked up at that time, that's good news. You found the germ. That's where the germ theory is valid, okay? But now, the bad news, you found the germ, and now you're gonna have to do something about it. And here's the thing, is that parasite treatment with antimicrobial drugs is many times worse than the disease, okay? Liver damage, extreme toxicity, and so forth. And herbal medicine in general is not strong enough unless you are taking things for extended periods of time. So people will say, okay, I took some wormwood and clove and all my symptoms went away. Then I'd say, great, okay. But more often what I hear is people say, well, I took the wormwood and clove, I took it for a long period of time and I couldn't tolerate it anymore and I still have the symptoms. Now, the reason for that is because these parasites frequently are actually so stubborn that they are hard to eradicate, even with the Western drugs. And in order to even get close to that with herbal medicine, you have to take semi-toxic herbs like wormwood that can damage your liver if you're taking them at therapeutic doses for more than a couple of weeks. You see, so we run into the same problem here. So here's where we have to go back to the terrain, and we have to say, how much can we regulate the terrain? How effectively can we attack? And this is where we must put both systems together. And this is a perfect example of working with your doctor, okay? Which is what our theme is today. That is, if you have to take an antibiotic, if you have to take an antimicrobial for a parasite in the digestive system, you must also protect your gut and take care of it and rebuild it. Now, here's another principle here that makes things really complicated with both bacterial infections and parasitic infections in the gut. And that is, the microbes set up disturbance in the terrain. They cause inflammation and toxicity. And that disturbance in the terrain continues even after the microbe has been eradicated, right? And we see this over and over and over again. This also happens with Lyme. It happens with lots of different things. You can attack it heavily with drugs. You can attack it heavily with herbs. You can attack it heavily with drugs and herbs, and you can also rebuild and support. And sometimes the inflammatory reaction and symptoms are just locked into place and just persist, even though there are no microbes left to attack. You see, that's where it gets really difficult. But what's important here is to understand these basic principles. And maybe for some of you, this might be shedding some light. You might be getting a little bit of an aha moment on what's been happening for you. All right, let's move on here. And I already said everything I wanted to say about the heavy metals. I don't think that we need to spend any more time on that. But I do want to touch on one more point from last week. And that is, I get a lot of questions from people about things that are simply not plausible, or they are questionable in different, their plausibility is something we should consider at least, okay? Now, one of the things, there's three things I'll mention here, but there's a lot of things like this. Number one of the more curious things that I've heard about is calcification of our pineal gland. All right. Now, a lot of people have asked me about this, and I got curious. And here's the thing that you'll find if you really research this. One is you're going to see the Western medical information, and then you're going to see the popular culture information. Now, the popular culture information about this is really intriguing, because virtually every site that I looked at concerning calcification of the pineal gland, it had something to do with the chakras and with the mystical dimensions of the pineal, okay, and with things to activate the pineal for higher consciousness and things like that. Now, that's fine. I don't have any judgment about it, but it's not medical, okay? Then over on the medical side, the research that I've done on this, I found that calcification of the pineal is like almost a normal thing in humans, okay? It starts in childhood. It happens all over the world, okay? It happens in all different populations of people. And then if you look at the next thing, and this is in the category of questionable detox methods, the same sites that say, well, you have calcified pineal, then offer some kind of detox program to detoxify your pineal. And in my opinion, these are simply not plausible. It seems that one of the herbs that's recommended commonly for detoxifying your pineal is garlic. Well, I don't think that anybody can actually verify that this is true. I have not come across this information, and if somebody has this, please let me know. I don't think anybody has been able to actually show an MRI image of a pineal before and after detoxification, okay? So if that is actually done, then okay, you got my attention, okay? But for somebody who's simply saying, take garlic and it will detoxify your pituitary or your pineal gland, then I will be very skeptical, okay? And I will say, well, how do you know that it was calcified to start with? Do you have actual visualization of the pineal, okay? And then therefore, how much garlic, for how long? And did it cause all kinds of digestive problems? And now do you have a MRI showing that the pineal is no longer calcified? You see, when you delve into it with a little bit of rational thinking here, these kinds of things kind of fall apart a little bit. So that's just one example, all right? And another example goes back to the parasite question. And this is a really interesting subject. And of course, I'm challenging people here. I'm challenging practitioners. I'm challenging various writers and authors. So there is a very popular parasite, which is claimed that you can see yourself in the toilet. And that is called liver flukes. Okay, now this is actually a discredited theory, a discredited diagnostic method that was being passed around for a long time, about 10 or 20 years ago. And it was started by a woman who wrote a book called The Cure for All Cancers, okay? And her entire program was, everybody has liver flukes, and if you get rid of liver flukes, you can cure everything. And her second book was called The Cure for All Diseases. And it was all the same thing. It was all, you have to detoxify the liver flukes, okay? Well, obviously, that's not very rational. It's not very comprehensive. You can't cure everything by getting rid of liver flukes. Now, here's the thing. Study liver flukes, okay? Because there are still practitioners here in the US who are still using that liver fluke concept. Well, the thing is that liver flukes are isolated to very specific types of geographical regions where people pick them up because of very damp, tropical, warm environment. And they cause a very significant identifiable disease, okay, where they actually get in and they cause liver damage. So it's not a plausible diagnosis. So that's why when I hear about this, it's still circulating around, okay? It's not plausible, all right? Parasites create all kinds of mysterious conditions, and they are mysterious. Sometimes they're hard to find, but liver flukes, that's something you're gonna pick up somewhere, in Africa if you're not hygienic. So one more thing I wanna discuss here, and I hear this a lot, and I want to point out some of the complexities with it, and this is EMFs, all right? So EMF sensitivity it's a real thing, and EMFs are not good for us, okay? But there is an interesting phenomena that takes place with a lot of people who are extremely sensitive, all right? I just want to point this out, because when people say I'm really sensitive to EMFs, I believe them, okay? And I believe that all of us actually are being affected by it and can feel it in different ways. But there is a syndrome. It's like a hypersensitivity to EMF syndrome, okay, where people really can't function at all. And they claim to be able to feel, when they're in this environment, and they feel better when they're not. And I always listen to everybody. You know, I don't discount anybody's experience. But here's an interesting observation that a number of studies have been done, and people with this syndrome have been tested, and they have not been able to accurately describe when they are actually being exposed to EMFs or not. Okay. And so what that means is not that they have some psychological disorder, although, you know, it might be the case in some people, but it means there's other factors, and that's what we have to consider. Okay. So in other words, when people say, I walked into a room and I got sick from all the cell phones, okay, I can believe that. There's some plausibility to that. But then there's this test showing that these people, you know, are completely protected from EMFs and they still say they feel it. Or they're in a place where there are EMFs and they say they don't feel it. So there's no correlation actually in these tests. So what do we need to be concerned about then? Well, I think we all need to be concerned about EMFs, but it's just a question of let's look at the bigger picture. And here's the thing. One of the things that some of you have heard me say many times is when people talk about this kind of thing, a lot of times it's not as bad as you think, but it's a lot worse than you know. And that's the case with a lot of this stuff. And EMFs, of course, are linked to 5G, and 5G is linked to conspiracy theories with COVID, and all this is where it starts to get really implausible. So where I go is I just look at it from the perspective of what the science is saying. And the science is saying that EMFs are not good for us, okay? And there are ways to protect ourselves from EMFs. So I'm totally down with all of that. But what's interesting that a lot of people are not hearing about with this whole 5G thing is that the scientists are afraid of the 5G thing, but not for the same reasons we are, okay? They're not concerned about it frying us, okay? They're concerned about all the satellites that are going to block our ability to predict the weather, okay? Because it's changing the atmosphere, and that's much more serious, all right? So when it comes to these kind of complex situations, what it comes down to is what helps you feel better, all right? And then the question comes, what do you want to do about everybody's interconnectedness technologically? And the place that I always leave it for people, you know, because sometimes people debate me, and that's fine, and they say, you know, 5G is frying us, and the government is doing it to us, and all of that kind of thing. And my response to that is very simple. Well, don't use it, okay? Just throw your phone away. Stop using computers, you know, get your house disconnected. And that, I think, is a responsible way of looking at that, because we are all creating these things by using them. And if we are using them, we are collectively agreeing to give our money to the communication technology companies, all right? And as long as we're participating and we're giving them the money, then we just have to say, well, all right, that's part of the deal, is that we're working with these technologies, and these technologies are not healthy, but I'm still working with them and I'm still paying for them, okay? And here we are in this class using this kind of energy so that we can communicate, all right? Now, every occupation has its dangers, and I can tell you, I've seen a lot of people suffering all over the world doing all kinds of things. And this kind of communication technology is a lot less stressful than a lot of what people are doing. And so that's kind of how I look at it. Okay, so enough philosophy. And now I wanted to touch briefly on some of the really dangerous stuff. And maybe you got a link, or maybe you looked at the link that I gave you last time. And the most important thing that I wanted to show you was the databases for the essential oil injuries. Because out of all of the natural products that are out there, okay, essential oils are by far the most dangerous and hurting the most people. And it's not the oils that's doing it. It's the marketing that's doing it. It's the fraudulent claims that are doing it, okay? And so I will just take 2 minutes here. I'll just give you a quick tour of a couple of these sites. And I want to show you some examples of what the fraudulent marketing is all about, all right? There's other things where this is happening, but this is by far the most dangerous, all right? So I gave you a couple of websites, but let me pull this up and give you a quick tour here. And this is Robert Tisserand's adverse reaction database, okay? And so this is a really good source. And the reason that I gave you this one is because I wanted to give you an example of the kind of thinking behind this, okay? And the response that a lot of the multi-level marketing reps and companies are having to this. So let me pull this over a little bit. Okay. So here you can see that there's the case, there's the reaction, it's the oils, single or blend, bath or wash, all of that, dilution, okay, and all of this. And I wanted to just show you one specific case here. And this is really common. And this is a controversy that I've been dragged into for the last 15 years. It's not something that I want to be dragged into, but I'm working in the field of natural medicine, and I have a small essential oil company, and I have been educating people about how to use them correctly and their benefits, and they definitely help people a lot. But because they're being widely promoted in unsafe ways by the multi-level marketing companies, I have had to be on this crusade, okay, to help people avoid these problems. And I have actually been targeted, all right, as a result of that, on various forums. Different people have said, well, if you are telling people don't take essential oils internally, that must mean that your essential oils are not therapeutic grade. Well, there's no such thing as a therapeutic grade essential oil. There's no such grading system that exists, all right? You either have pure essential oils or you don't, and you either use them right or you don't. And if you don't use them right, you can hurt yourself, like this person here. And here's a testimonial. This is what I wanted to show you, because this is fraudulent marketing with dangerous claims, okay? So this woman burned herself, okay? And then she started putting lavender, tea tree, and helichrysum oils to treat that burn, okay? And then she started getting these horrible skin reactions after just a few applications. So, began to spread, and it spread to the chest and to the face, okay? And here's what I wanted to point out. And this is what I have heard literally hundreds and hundreds of times from people who have been injured, okay? After beginning to have the skin reactions, I was told I was told I was detoxing and probably had candida that was causing the rashes, and was told to try this cleanse offered by this company. That included taking essential oils in capsules internally, herbal cleansing supplements, drinking lemon oil in my water, and continuing to treat the rashes with undiluted oil. This continued on for several months of being very ill, gastrointestinal issues, yeast infections, and covered in rashes before I came to my senses. Okay, now, the reason that I wanted to bring this to your attention is because this kind of improper use of these botanical products is because Marketing is what's driving it. There's not medical education, because even the smallest amount of medical education will inform people that essential oils are extremely concentrated. And that's all you need to know. So you have to use them in a very diluted form. Okay, so study that. And at this point, I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, that's probably one of the most common questions that I've had. And that's what this course is answering these questions. And that question is, why can't I take essential oils internally? All my friends are doing it. Well, that's why. Okay. And now I don't tell them anymore. Now I just give them the links to these databases with this horrible information of, very good information about these horrible things that are happening. And I think that's more effective. Some people often ask me, my friends are involved in MLMs and they're trying to get me to do this. What do I tell them? I said, go look at these databases. So I gave you 2 links to 2 databases. So now if you're concerned, you can look at it. If you are concerned for your friends, they can look at it. All right. So there's also quite a bit of discussion about all kinds of detox programs that are out there. I think I'm going to start to kind of wind it down here. But I just wanted to mention, in case you haven't heard this, that gallbladder flushes don't flush your gallbladder. And those things that are floating in the toilet are not your gallstones. So, end of story. And I don't think I'll take any time to explain it. But now we have another final topic before we wrap up this side of things. And that is truthful and half-truthful and fictitious claims of natural cures, all right? And the question here is, how do we really find real solutions? What's the evidence for treatments being effective? So I have 3 main sources that I rely on all the time. And if you understand these 3 main sources, then you will be able to pretty much cut through the fog of all the various claims. So the 3 main sources where we can identify if plants really do something or not, plant medicine or the products from them really do something or not. Number 1, something has been used for thousands of years. Okay. And so therefore, if somebody says, okay, this formula, Triphala, from Ayurveda, will help to detoxify your colon, I would say yes. But why? I would say because people have been using those 3 fruits for literally thousands of years for that purpose, okay? But then the second major lineage of information is the modern research, okay? And the modern research backs up the traditional use. And that's what you're really looking for. You're looking for both what's in the databases and what's in the classics, all right? And if you see reishi mushroom is mentioned in the Chinese medical classics 2,000 years ago for this particular purpose or these purposes, and then you see over at PubMed that there's like 2,000 research studies on reishi mushroom, and they say just the same thing and other things also. You put those 2 things together, you've got a pretty strong basis for saying, okay, this herb does something historically and modern proof. Then what we have now is also the empirical evidence that's happening right now. Okay, so those are the clinical trials, and those are also, people's personal experiences, and that's valid. These 3 lineages of information, these 3 sources of information, if all 3 of those things are there, then we have a really solid case that this herb, this formula, this plant actually does it. Okay. Now, here's where it gets tricky. When things are discovered, then they suddenly explode on the internet, and there's a whole bunch of new products that are out there. And one of the best examples of this phenomena that has happened recently that complicates this whole thing that I just told you, I gave you how we can make this really simple. But now what happens is that the marketing comes in and it gets really complicated. And so the best example is the cannabis products. All right. So let's look at cannabis. It's got thousands of years of use. Okay. Lots of medicines are made from it, especially in Ayurveda, but lots of other places also. It has that long history of being used, and modern research that's there also. And then we have lots of people saying, hey, this really helped me. But then go over to Herbalgram and do a little bit of research on quality control. And what are you going to find? The FDA has tested lots and lots of CBD products. And guess what they find? There's no CBD in them. Okay. That's where the marketing makes things kind of messy. So what do we do about that? Well, I don't really know. I have spent a little bit of time looking into all of this. And my conclusion with the CBD products is you get what you pay for. Okay. The recommendations that have been made in different reviews and the reports from the FDA about what companies actually had CBD in their CBD products indicated that CBD is not cheap at all. Real CBD is not cheap. So that means if you're concerned about it, excuse me, you want to try it, you may have to spend a bit of money. And so I tried some, and I went ahead and I got the best brand that was out there, recommended, highly looked at the FDA. This company actually has CBD in it, all of that. But we're talking about like, $10 a dose kind of thing. It's ridiculous. So, well, the way around that is we learn how to take care of the plant ourselves and how to process it and how to use it ourselves. We bring back the traditional knowledge. Another one, okay, I know that I raised more questions than I answered there, but just wanted to let you know some of the complexities. Now, another one that is widely discussed, questionable cures, frankincense essential oil for cancer, all right? Now, this is a big subject. I'll keep it really short. And that is, when people say, I cured myself naturally of cancer, you need to ask a lot of questions, all right? And I suspect that if you ask a lot of questions, you're going to discover some basic things. That person may have done that. It is highly unlikely that they did it using only one ingredient. It's highly unlikely that they did that only with frankincense oil, okay? It is quite probable, totally plausible, that frankincense oil helped them at some level. So I know that there's a lot of forums and discussions and events and all kinds of things happening where people are saying, I cured myself of cancer, I did this, and this. And I believe it. Like I said, I believe people when they make claims and when they say these things. But that's not the end of the story. Because then what you have to ask is, what did they do? What did they do with allopathic medicine at the same time? And can these results be duplicated? And here's how logic, critical thinking can help us. If there was a plant cure for cancer that was repeatedly effective, we would know about it, okay? And if one person is able to cure cancer, most likely it's not just from one plant, it's probably from a very aggressive integrated treatment for an extended period of time. And when people say, I did that, that's more plausible than just saying, well, I drank some frankincense oil and it went away. That's not plausible, all right? So this is how we have to think about these kind of things. Now, what I will tell you, just as a little transition here, because now we're done with catching up, and now we're going into the more medical-oriented stuff with the doctors and the drugs. And what I will tell you is that what is now emerging, the best approach for cancer treatment is generally a synthesis of natural and allopathic. And it depends on the individual, it depends on the cancer, the stage, the aggressiveness, many, many things. But what we know now, and this is pretty well articulated, okay, in many circles, in naturopathic circles, there are many people who are doing really leading edge research with herbal medicine for cancer treatment and cancer support. And what is now being articulated, which I think is very important to understand, allopathic medicine can kill the cancer cell, but it's very destructive to the body. Natural medicine is very supportive to the body, but it cannot kill the cancer cell. So now some people are going to raise the objection and they're going to say, I saw studies that said that frankincense essential oil will kill the cancer cells. And here's where the marketing confuses everything. That's in vitro. That's in a petri dish. And in order to get that result in the body, you would have to turn your blood into frankincense oil. Okay, so that's where the confusion is coming from. And unfortunately, a lot of this urban legend about frankincense oil will cure cancer, it's based on misleading translations of in vitro petri dish research on standardized cancer cell lines, because in a standardized cancer cell line in a petri dish, you can kill the cancer cells with the frankincense oil. But how are you going to do that in your body? How are you going to get those levels of frankincense oil to the cells that are in your tissues? Well, there's lots of things that are being researched, and that's the direction that medicine's going, is how to deliver these botanical products in concentrations that will do the same thing as the chemo drugs, all right? Or at least how to combine them. So that that wraps up my little talk about the things from last week. I hope that you found it interesting. It's certainly a complicated subject. And now let's go ahead and switch over. Now, finally, here we are at Module 3, the changing paradigm of medicine and healthcare. And we will be able to actually catch up here. A lot of the things I'm going to share with you here for the next 30 or so minutes, these are principles that we can sum up fairly quickly. But I do invite you to, submit any discussion that you want to have about it. So basically what this module is really about is looking at how modern medicine is really evolving. And it's becoming a lot better in a lot of ways, okay? And natural medicine is evolving very rapidly also. And we have something totally new, and that is the synthesis of both of them. And that represents a completely new kind of medicine, really. So it gives us the opportunity then to utilize the best of both systems, you see. And that's where becoming educated as self-care clinicians is really important, because if we are just in one field of work or study, allopathic medicine may be getting better in some ways, but we won't realize that maybe we don't even need it, you see, because there's all of these things that are coming out now about how natural medicine works so effectively. And so gradually what's going to happen, and this is happening more and more, is that natural medicine will be recognized for its strengths to be able to do things as a first line of defense and treatment, as opposed to the last. And this is something that I've recognized in clinical practice for decades, okay, since I first started 40 years ago. People were coming because they wanted to get off their medications. And I was realizing, well, the situation would have been a lot easier if they had just used natural medicine first, instead of all of these layers and layers of drugs and their side effects. And so now, in addition to the original condition that we can treat with herbal medicine, now we have to treat all of these other things that got in the way and complicated it. So I believe that one of the developments, the evolution, positive evolutionary growth of natural medicine, is that we're going to understand more and more about what natural medicine can actually do as a first treatment, okay? And that we don't have to run to antibiotics as often, okay? And modern medicine would be happy to hear that. And we don't have to run to the anti-inflammatories and the addictive substances so often. And a lot of doctors are totally on board with that. You know, they are increasingly aware of the dangers of pharmaceutical drugs, and they're increasingly open-minded about integrative medicine also. Now, I know it's not 100%, and that's what this remaining time is about, but the allopathic innovations are taking lots of very interesting forms, and that includes treatments that are less invasive and toxic, and hospitals are bringing in acupuncture and qigong, stress reduction, meditation, even herbal medicine in some cases, you see. So medicine is being influenced quite a lot. Allopathic medicine is being influenced a lot by the presence of natural medicine. And I will say that the main thing that is driving that is just people like us, you see, educated self-care clinicians, okay, or people who have some level of clinical self-care knowledge, okay. And the doctors are being exposed to this more and more, and to their credit, doctors are also going into the field more and more, wanting to practice more natural methods also. Now, along with that, we also have the fact that there are so many new complicated situations coming out that allopathic medicine cannot treat very well, and natural medicine can. Because allopathic medicine doesn't give us any natural detoxification and doesn't give us nutrition. And without those, we can't really get well. That's what natural medicine does. And most importantly, what's happening is that the doctor-patient relationship, that paradigm is changing. And now we have more and more people that know a lot about their health conditions, and they are taking more responsibility for themselves. And this is changing how medicine is practiced and how doctors are thinking about patients also. So let's just go through now and look at the main points here. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into these primary topics. So number one, in order to really understand and work with this changing paradigm of medicine, we need to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of both allopathic and natural medicine. The more we understand the strengths and the weaknesses of both systems, the more we can understand when we need one, when we need the other, when we need both, or when we need neither, okay? So, what is allopathic medicine really strong at? All right, here's a way to help you understand the basic principles of how allopathic medicine functions, how natural medicine functions, and what makes it strong and what makes it weak, okay? With this information, you should be able to reconceptualize both medical systems, because one of the common mistakes that people make is that they think in very simplistic terms about complicated subjects. I would say we have an epidemic of that now. Okay. And in medicine, what that means is that there's a lot of people that just think the doctor knows everything, the drugs are the answer, end of story. I'm not interested in anything else. But there's also a significant population of people who feel the same thing about natural medicine. I'm never going back to the doctor. It's a terrible experience. They don't know anything. There's a lot of times, there's a lot of trauma, and there's justifiable reasons for that thinking. But if there is something that allopathic medicine offers that is the best treatment or the best medication or the best approach or the best diagnostic method or whatever, we should be open-minded to using it. So in other words, we should not think in political terms, okay, when it comes to medical systems. We should think inclusively that there are all of these methods all across this spectrum. Some of them are very sensitive, like listening to the pulse. Some are very invasive, okay? And likewise, all of these medications, some are extremely toxic and some are very, very mild. We should not think in terms of, oh, this is this and this is that. We should think this is the range of medicine that I have access to. What parts am I going to use for what? Okay, that's the blessing that we have right now, is that we are in a unique time, because keep in mind that in most parts of the world, most of the time, you know, medical resources were quite limited. Now, there were, of course, very sophisticated medical systems that developed in China and in India, and there was a lot of brilliant developments. But there's never been a time anywhere in the world where we had access to a spectrum of resources and possibilities that are as great as we have now. And so we should not throw anything out. We should just use it correctly. So one of the main strengths of allopathic medicine is that it can give us objective diagnosis. Objective means you get your blood work done, everybody looks at the results, everybody sees, okay, you have high cholesterol. There's nothing subjective about that at all. It is objective, okay? Now, let's contrast that with one of the main weaknesses of natural medicine, okay, which is subjective diagnosis. And I've already given you an example of a subjective diagnosis that has been totally confusing to you, and that is a simple assignment to see if you are a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha person. Okay, and if you can't figure out if you're a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha person, how are you going to be able to get a clear diagnosis? All right, and so the diagnostic methods of natural medicine are very profound if you know how to do them. And like I said last week, very few people actually really know how to do this at a very deep level. But that includes listening to the pulse. Now, here's the thing. You listen to the pulse, that is not objective. It is subjective. And therefore, you can have 10 different practitioners listen to the pulse, and there's going to be variation in what they say. You are not going to get 10 readings that are exactly the same, because you have 10 different people with 10 different levels of experience, 10 different levels of sensitivity, and 10 different models of even reading the pulse. And they're going to say things that may have some general agreement, but it's not objective. And so how do you make pulse diagnosis objective? You put electronic sensors on your fingertips and you connect that to a computer so that the pulse wave can be seen by everybody, and there is no human translation of the information. All you're doing is you are just reading it, or even better, you put some kind of monitor on the pulse that isn't even using your own fingers. Then you're going to see the pulse on a screen, okay? And it's not going to be, well, I learned about this particular pulse system from this doctor, and this doctor over here uses this pulse system, and therefore we have subjective interpretations of the pulse. Now, if that doctor is really skillful and they really know what that pulse means, okay, and what the tongue reading means and what the face reading means, If they get it right, great. Now, here's the strength of natural medicine. A lot of times we don't even have to get the diagnosis right because the treatment is so helpful anyway. All right. And that's the weakness of allopathic medicine. So here we have the two basic strengths and weaknesses. Allopathic medicine is really good at objective diagnosis, but then what do they have to offer us? Toxic medications. Natural medicine, classical Asian medicine, is not very objective in its diagnostic methods. It's very vague. There's a lot of discrepancies and there's, a lot of variations in what the doctors could say. But what do they have to offer us? They have plants and products and treatments that are probably going to help us and probably not cause any harm, okay? So that's strengths and weaknesses at that level. Allopathic medicine, we know, acute care, all right? Emergency room medicine. That's a great benefit. If you need emergency room medicine, you're not going to go see an acupuncturist. Allopathic medicine has developed a huge range of pharmaceuticals that help people with specialized conditions, okay? Keep in mind that allopathic drugs have saved millions and millions of lives, all right? And they're a great blessing, but they have a karmic price. Like, for example, the antimicrobials are losing their powers, all right? But when penicillin first came out, it was considered a miracle drug because people used to die from uncomplicated, simple infections all the time. And that's what will start to come back again when antibiotics lose their power. Is that, you go to the dentist, you get a simple infection, you get a root canal, simple infection, antibiotics don't work anymore, you die from it, okay? So people used to die from these things all the time. It was just a normal part of life. And when these drugs came out, they were miracles, okay? Absolute miracles. And now a couple generations later, we just take them for granted. So lots of examples of this, people all over the world, they used to go blind from cataracts, and cataracts are a really easy process to remove with, simple surgical techniques. Or like iodine supplementation for goiter. There have been large populations of people that have been iodine deficient, that have developed goiters and hypothyroid, which stunts their growth and their cognitive function and everything. Millions of people have suffered from iodine deficiency. And so these are some of the benefits of allopathic medicine we should never lose sight of, never forget about, that these developments have helped people tremendously, okay? But again, the main weakness of allopathic medicine, the drugs don't give us nutrition, they can't rebuild our immunity or our vitality, and they don't help us detox. And here's another thing that you might not think about. Allopathic medicine does not demand that you have a healthy lifestyle or self-care, you see. Allopathic medicine is actually really a perfect system of medicine for people who don't want to take care of themselves, you see. And the less that people want to take care of themselves, the more money the system makes. So this is a strength of natural medicine, but it's also a weakness of natural medicine also, because it requires that we take care of ourselves for it to work. So let's look now at some of the strengths of natural medicine. So it's nutritive, it supports natural detoxification, and you're going to wonder about this. I'm going to say its diagnostic systems are subjective. Well, I just got done telling you that that's a weakness. And now I'm telling you that it's a strength. And that's because it's both. The reason that the subjective diagnosis is also a strength in natural medicine is because, we are diagnosing an individual. And in allopathic medicine, we're diagnosing biochemistry for the most part. We're not looking at the individual so much. I mean, it's starting to come more and more, But natural medicine, the diagnostic systems of natural medicine require that we understand the individual, because we are treating a constitution. And this is the strength of Vata Pitta Kapha, you see. When we understand the body types and we understand the subdoshas, especially, then we can understand that this person's body type needs more of this kind of diet, more of this kind of lifestyle. And this person's body type over here needs that. There's very little of that in allopathic medicine at all. It's not individualized medicine, really. So the subjective diagnostic methods of natural medicine are extremely important for understanding the individual. And the strength of natural medicine is that it demands personal responsibility, you see. That's also a weakness, because if you are demanding personal responsibility, then on the one hand, you will get better results if you take better care of yourself, okay? But on the other hand, if you're not a person who's going to take care of yourself, then natural medicine is not going to work so well for you. Okay, so those are just a few things that I wanted to talk about. But there's a few other quick principles here that kind of illustrate this. So the milder the condition, the less complicated it is, the less that you will need pharmaceutical medicine, and the more natural medicine will be effective, okay? And vice versa. So when illnesses become really complicated and complex and chronic, okay, then frequently neither system of medicine works very well. But allopathic medicine may work better at controlling symptoms, but natural medicine, we will have to set realistic expectations about what it can do, okay? Now, natural medicine, herbal medicine specifically, can be used at any time of life, in any condition, all right? And that's a great benefit, because we can use it many times in place of pharmaceutical drugs, and it works better. We can use it to get off pharmaceutical drugs, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And we can use it if we have to be on pharmaceutical drugs to protect our health. And that is also one of the main directions that the synthesis of these medical systems is going in, which is that herb-drug interactions are not necessarily negative. A lot of them are positive. And what that is pointing to, as I mentioned before, is that we can start to use herbs and certain medications together to reduce the need and the dose of the medication, and to pick up some of that and potentize it with the herbs, okay? So here's a good example. And this is an example also of how people think allopathically about herbal medicine. So there's a lot of that, okay? Just because we are using natural products, and just because we're using herbs, does not mean that we are actually practicing holistic medicine. What we see a lot of is practicing allopathic medicine using natural products. And I've given you a clear example of this earlier, and that is with small intestine bacterial overgrowth. If you are still thinking in terms of germ theory, and you are just substituting berberine instead of an antibiotic, it's the same thing, you see. But in order to really understand how herbal medicine works, we have to think in a completely different way. And that's because plants have a different relationship with our body than the drugs do, okay? Plants are living beings, and they're full of very, very complex molecular intelligence that comes into our body, okay? And they're full of a life force that relates to our life force biologically. It is not the same thing as just take a molecule to control a symptom at all right? It is just as complicated as allopathic medicine in some ways. So a good example of this is people frequently think that this herb will replace this drug. And I know that, you know, one common thing, St. John's wort, you know, for my depression, all right? You can't make that parallel, because you're expecting a lot from a plant. Okay, you're expecting that a plant is going to do what a pharmaceutical drug will do, and it won't do that. A plant will do something else. And if you understand what the plant does, then you can get even better results. But if you expect the plant to act like a pharmaceutical drug, there'll be disappointment. So one area where we see this is pain management. All right, and anti-inflammatory, over-the-counter medications and prescription drugs, opioids, things like that, pain management. So there is no herbal counterpart to most of the over-the-counter anti-inflammatory medications. Okay, you simply can't do it. You simply cannot take something that will just knock out the pain. Okay, the closest you will get in the world of plant medicine is going to be the cannabis products or opium. All right, and those are two things that have some pretty serious side effects if you take it. And if you need them and you use them correctly, they can be better alternatives than the pharmaceuticals. All right, but it's a complicated topic. But with the exception of those two things, there's virtually nothing in the botanical pharmacy that will do what aspirin does. Okay, and yes, people will say, well, white willow bark, and that's true. Okay, there are some milder counterparts that have less toxic kinds of effects, or meadowsweet. There are anti-inflammatory herbs that are milder, but they are absolutely not in the same class, and they cannot be replicated in that same type of thinking. But here's the difference. If we're to sum this up in terms of strengths or weaknesses, okay, the strength of the allopathic anti-inflammatory and analgesic drugs is that they get rid of they block the sensations highly effectively. They don't get rid of the inflammation, they block the sensations, okay? And that allows people to live without pain. And that's a great blessing. If you're in pain and you've got a lot of inflammation and you really need these medications, pain management and inflammation management, antispasmodics also in the same category, okay? If you can't function without these, then those medications mean a lot to you. They help you get through the day, all right? That's the strength. The weakness is that they slow down the healing process and they make it worse, okay? And it's pretty well established at this point that any of those, even over-the-counter simple kinds of things, they make it harder for the body to get well, all right? So that's the downside. Okay, now on the other side, we look at the strength and weakness of herbal medicine. The weakness of herbal medicine is that you're not going to be able to manage pain and inflammation and spasms at the same level unless you're using something really strong that has potential side effects, okay, like strong cannabis products. But the strength of botanical medicine is that it will correct the underlying terrain that will help the body to heal itself at a deeper level, okay? So then what we see in clinical practice is that people come in and they've been on a lot of medications managing symptoms, but now it's destroying their stomach, it's destroying their kidneys, all these kind of things. And so then there has to be a transition. And so then the natural things come in, but it takes some time to clean up the terrain before the person can start to take less of the medications, all right? So we see the same kind of situation with chemotherapy and herbal medicine being combined. So for example, I stated what is known and understood now is that allopathic medicine can kill the cancer cell, but not always. And it's very destructive to the rest of the tissues, okay, and the immune system. And what we know about herbal medicine is that it's very supportive to the immune system and regenerative to the fluids and the vitality and so forth. And so obviously both systems have strengths and weaknesses, okay? And what I think, and I'll just give you my own personal experience or clinical background and experience with this, is that people who use natural medicine, nutritional therapy, meditation, acupuncture, qigong, healthy diet, herbal products, immune supporting things specifically, those people will either have a more successful outcome with the allopathic medicine. And if they are not able to cure the cancer, they will have a higher quality of life and quantity of life. And this is pretty well established at this point in terms of some studies, long-term studies also. And I'll show you one of those files actually, okay? So let's go ahead now to the next thing. Well, actually, I'm going to skip around because I'm going to open it up here. Since I just mentioned, well, let me see, what do I want to cover here? All right, so we have quite a bit of things to talk about. How do we discuss these things with our doctor? All right, let me just do one point here before I wrap things up, okay? So we have some things for next week, but basically there's several points here that have to do with our new paradigm of medicine, where we come in as educated and empowered patients, and we're talking to the doctor. And there's a whole bunch of variables on what the discussion can be about, but this course is about these things that I've heard over and over again. So one of the themes here is your doctor wants you to go on a medication, okay? And you don't want to. What do you do? That's one theme, okay? And the doctor wants you to start drugs, but you suspect that it's maybe not even your best first line of treatment, okay? So that's kind of part B of that discussion. Or another big theme, and this is a very common thing, topic of discussion in consultations. You're already on medications and you want to get off and you want to use natural alternatives. How do you do it safely? Okay. Or along the same lines, you want to use some herbal medicine in conjunction with some other kind of treatment, like chemotherapy. All right. So let's talk about one of these points, and we'll come back to it again next week. And that is, what are your options if the doctor wants you to take something and you don't want to take it? All right. Well, there's a set of simple questions that are very helpful to ask. Okay. And this is you coming in as an educated and empowered self-care clinician. And you just ask, is it really necessary? Number one. And what are the risks of taking it? And what are the risks of not taking it? Okay, that's number two. Number three, and this is where you can open up the discussion about herbal medicine. What are the other options? Are there better medications? Do I have a period of time to like work on lowering my cholesterol, or is this like a crisis that I need to do something like today? Okay. And very important, what will happen if I don't do anything? Okay. That's something to consider. Now, the answers to those questions depend on a lot of different factors. Severity of the condition, it depends on what you've tried in the past and whether this is something that's new. What are the resources? How dedicated are you? You know, because if you're a person who will do absolutely anything to avoid going on a medication, then you will change your physiology. All right. And like I said at the beginning, that's what this is all about. You will find all the ways to change your physiology. All right. You will completely change what you eat. You will completely change your patterns of hydration and elimination. You will completely relearn how to breathe and oxygenate your bloodstream. You will do anything within your capacity to stay off that medication. And here's one of the principles about talking to your doctor. The more you demonstrate your dedication and willpower and efforts to take care of yourself, the more open-minded the doctor is going to be. All right. Put yourself in the position of the doctor. Somebody comes in, they're at risk for a heart attack. They came to see you. You practice a particular form of medicine. This is what you do all day long. This is what you know. You don't know about herbal medicine. What you're going to do is you're going to suggest that they go on certain blood pressure lowering medications and statins to get their cholesterol down. Okay. Now, is that the end of the story? Well, as a empowered clinical level self-care practitioner, if the doctor tells you, look, your cholesterol is high, I'm going to put you on these statins. You say, well, wait a minute. I've studied these statins. I know what they're doing to people, okay? And so first of all, let's talk about the level of cholesterol, and let's talk about how quickly it has gone up, or has it been exactly the same for the last 10 years, all right? Those are two things you think about with cholesterol. And then you look at all the other associated factors with metabolic disorders, because people tend to have higher than ideal cholesterol frequently. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a medical emergency that you got to take statins for. And here's my suggestion, just in terms of being an empowered patient, okay? Unless your cholesterol has been going up really, really fast, indicating some underlying metabolic disorder, okay, you probably have time to work on it, number one. If your other metabolic markers are pretty healthy, you don't have to attack cholesterol by itself, all right? What you're concerned about, rapidly rising cholesterol, along with chronic, excuse me, chronic or rapidly rising blood pressure, chronic or rapidly rising blood sugar, okay, weight gain, all these kind of things. You put all those things together, inflammatory markers, arterial blockage. If you've got a lot of those things happening, then you have already moved into the area where you should consider the pharmaceutical drugs as a temporary measure until you can get those things under control on your own, okay? All right, so a good doctor is going to help you put all these things into perspective, and they're not going to look too microscopically just at the cholesterol. But I know a lot of doctors do this. You know, they look at the cholesterol and they say, well, it's too high. Well, what is too high? Okay, it all depends on the context, okay? And so yes, if it's 50 points too high, 100 points too high, okay, sure, that gives you a project. But if you're healthy otherwise, that reduces the risk, okay? You've got all these other things going and you haven't been healthy your whole life and you're still smoking and you're still putting on weight and eating bad. All right, you're a candidate for the drugs. But that's the strength of Western medicine. It's for people who won't take responsibility and do those things themselves. All right.